a change in the weathermen. Just days before storm season kicks off, we get a joint forecast of hurricane season from the best in the business. Retiring Chief Meteorologist Tim Deegan, welcome.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, my friend, Ann.
Thank you, my friend Tim, for being here.
Yes.
And incoming Chief Meteorologist Lew Turner. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, man. Thank you very much.
Has she ever called you Lewis before? I'm used to her calling you just Lew at best.
Government name.
Yeah, but Lewis.
Very
very
formal
chief,
on the air.
If I get a Lewis note at the house.
Hey, can I ask a quick question?
Go for it.
Why don't we start TV off with groovy music like they do?
I know. You're right.
I mean,
this is way groovier.
Yeah.
Hey, ask the consultants, Tim.
No, I'm not. You ask the consultants.
I'm going to stay out of the consultants.
I'm about ready to sit on the couch and throw things at the screen. So
you guys, it's a First Coast Connect full takeover today. So I'm just going to turn the mic over to Tim.
We never get to see each other.
I know.
We really don't.
You're different shifts.
Yes, we're different shifts. We've probably seen each other in the last 6 months more than we have in the last 16 years.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed the lessons.
I thought you were a nice guy, and really, we do get along.
I thought you were going to say, really, you're a terrible person.
No, we amazingly, that whole Salt Life thing, Lew, you should be sharing this, but I just know him. He grew up on the docks of Georgia and South Carolina, and so maybe we wouldn't necessarily be on the same surfboard or use the same rod, but that same body of water and tides and that whole bit. When we love being with our wives.
100%.
We want to make that clear.
Absolutely.
But if they're busy.
They love it when we're busy.
We wouldn't mind following the tide. Yeah,
100%. And that's why I came to Jacksonville 15 years ago. And one of the big reasons, I grew, like Tim said, I was born in Savannah, but grew up. A good bit of my childhood was in Brunswick, right up the road, within the market. I got cousins and family there, and then in South Carolina. And Jacksonville is all of those wonderful things where you get the river, you get the beach. It's almost like a bigger macrocosm of the little town I grew up in. You know what I mean? So a lot of the same things, just a lot bigger. Beaufort.
Excuse me.
Yeah, Beaufort in North Carolina, and then Beaufort in South Carolina.
That is a forever question.
Yeah.
So
Beaufort is north. Beaufort is south, beautiful Beaufort. We had the French connection. We had the Huguenots, just like we had here.
So Beaufort's beautiful.
Yes.
What are you saying about Beaufort?
Beaufort's fine.
Okay.
It's like, hey, Beau. The Beau reference. It's like that. And it's a similar town, too, Intracoastal Waterway.
Now, Lew, since you, not everybody knows the story in my audience, although they may well know it in your audience, but you actually had I don't know if it was a starring role in Forrest Gump, but certainly
I was a non-credited
role.
actor. And I like to say I was in an Academy Award-winning film when the Academy Awards come around. Yeah,
it might not have made it if it wasn't for.
No,
correct.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as little people, but much smaller actors. I don't know, whatever the phrase was. But yeah, so wedding scene. Check out when Forrest and Jenny get married. I was all of 9. You can see my bowl cut, back of my head.
The best
all in
times.
Beaufort. Yeah.
All right, I want to start with some serious stuff, even though you guys are kind of off on a lighter note.
Sorry.
Storm season, right? Starts in a couple days. And I guess we should ask you, Lew, how you feel about the fact that Tim's leaving right before it begins. I'm sure that's no accident.
Is it an accident?
Well, I mean, since Ann is here, it means we have to be factual, right?
Right.
Because she is an investigator. She is always getting closer to the truth. And I do mean in a serious way. I could spend a lot of time talking about what you've done through the decades, so thank you. But it's just how my contract went.
Yeah.
My contract truly just happened to come up every year on May 30th. And then when Rob Minnie, who was the general manager back then, said, okay, we'll just, when they decided I'm going to stay but not do the 11 anymore. So he said, everything else we'll keep the same as far as dates. And I said, sure. And, of course, then we rapidly realized, I'll be walking out just as hurricane season begins.
Yeah.
Good luck, Lew.
Thank you. This is not a slight to Tim at all, because he is the man. He has been fabulous, and you've learned so much. But what gives me comfort with hurricane season is the 15 or so years, the ones I've stood in. But besides me and taking me out of the equation, I've inherited an unbelievable team, Tim.
Yes.
So between Lee, Ross, and Robert, I mean, they really know their stuff. So
great variety. It
really is.
Yeah,
a wonderful variety, and people who want to work and they want to get it right. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? And truly care.
And
Um,
they're freaks about the weather, and I mean that as a compliment.
100%.
Yeah.
So these are people whose this is their passion, but their hobby. So of course, you go into every hurricane season with a just like you would opening day of baseball or anything like you're just excited. You're maybe excited it's too positive, but you're just ready. And there's a kind of that anxiousness on the edge of your seat, but prepared because you've got some awesome people with you.
Yeah, you've got
And
awesome people.
and I can add to that, over 43 years, there is the fact that things are warmer. And even for those who don't get the significance of that, heat is a measure of potential energy.
Mm.
And so it's no surprise at all that over 43 years, the amount of hurricanes, the amount of intense hurricanes, the frequency of which at least hurricanes threaten our area, that has increased. The point I'm making is that um, we have members on that team who have had more hurricane experience in the last 5 to 10 years than I got in my first 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously a bad thing for people, but as far as you can't look at a 25 or 30-year-old on the weather team anymore and say, well, they probably haven't experienced many hurricanes. Oh my gosh, just in the last 5 years, let
Yeah.
alone 10 years.
Well, I mean, I go back. I mean, even a tropical storm. I remember when I first got going was Beryl, and that was 2012. So I started 2010. For all intents and purposes, 2011 was when I was getting my feet going. But 2012, I remember Beryl standing on Jacksonville Beach, and it was a tropical storm. But that was where you got your feedback. But between Matthew, Irma, Ian, Nicole, and then Helene and Milton, just this past season, I mean, you start to build. And you start to learn a lot with potential. And the difference, I mean, those are all different. And they're all
Yes,
different,
they're
but
all
they were
different,
all
right.
extraordinarily different
Right.
fingerprints and different tracks, different styles, different strengths that you have to learn from. And that applies to Ross, Robert, and Lee.
Because yes, there's the meteorology to it, but if we're doing a good job forecasting, in my opinion, you're helping people who live on Myrtle Avenue
Yep.
or live in Mandarin or live in Marietta or live in Waycross, and you start learning, okay, that little creek can back up and flood a home wherever, and you start learning to the neighborhood level what different storm surges and winds mean. And that's the kind of experience that I mean that is just invaluable.
I mean, and that's more important now than ever, especially with the rain events that we
Mhm.
see. I mean,
Mhm.
hurricane season is one thing, but some of the worst storms that we've been getting have been just intense, impactful rain events, coupled sometimes with tides and winds.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing about the First Coast. So the very lifestyle that we dig, the salt lifestyle, means that we live in a relatively flat coastal community, and so when you get 20 inches of rain or 10 inches of rain, and the tide is high, the water has no place to go, and that's a significant event from Glenn County all the way down to Flagler.
And we've built in some places that maybe Mother Nature wasn't intending
Mhm.
and then you think about flooding. So I'm going to think about St. Augustine for a minute, and had speaking to a previous city manager and a gentleman who had done a lot of mitigation for St. Augustine. They've done a great job, but he was telling me it used to be that they could count on a Category 1 style surge event. Um, Meaning 3 to 4 feet of water coming into Avenida Menendez and out of the intracoastal there about once every 5 years. But he's telling me now they're getting these events with inundation about once a year. And whether that's through tropics or through just a heavy rainfall high tide event, so the mitigation down in St. Augustine, I mean, they're actually lifting homes, those ancient homes built in the 1800s right there on the bayfront. I mean, they're clearing out foundations and lifting them. And to quite frankly, I mean, just run from the water. I mean, because they have to do it somehow, and the only way to do that is to go up.
And then, of course, whether it's Jacksonville, Brunswick, in your older neighborhoods, where zoning wasn't best, to put it lightly, homes were built
Mm.
1, 2, 3 feet. You can go to some of those neighborhoods west of I-95 off of Trout River, and 1 or 2 or 3 feet. And same thing up in Brunswick, and even some of your older neighborhoods in West St. Augustine. And so yeah, you hope we never have the big one, But these days, to your point, heavy rain and a nor'easter can cause a lot of problems.
If you're just joining us, we are talking to Lew Turner and Tim Deegan about the retirement of Tim Deegan, Lew taking over, also hurricane season. If you have questions regarding the weather, climate change, or the change in the on air lineup, join our conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. And we do have some messages coming in. Roger on Facebook saying, I hate to see Tim go, but I'm glad he's passing the weather torch to Lewis.
I appreciate
Lewis.
that.
See, there you go.
Yeah.
Formal Lewis.
Government
Mary
name.
emailed Tim Deegan, always said he loved forecasting the weather, and this was clearly true. He will join the very few broadcasters I miss. And along with George Winterling, only the second weather forecaster. Thanks for your help with Marshfest at the beach, Tim.
Nice.
Wishing you fair winds and following seas. We did get an email actually yesterday as well with a question, Tim, which is why are you retiring now? This was from from a listener named Nick, and he'd said, George Winterling, who worked into his 80s. Why now for you?
So it's a great question. I love forecasting, no doubt about it. Love the people that I work with. I just felt like, and I was even thinking about this 3 years ago, that it was time for the next generation. But also because we've chosen, myself, Donna, to live in a place that we actually like to live in. I love being outside, and TV is everybody. If you have a job, you're scheduled, right? But TV is scheduled to the second. And I'm ready. I'm just ready to not. I don't want to say too much because Lou's saying, but So I love the forecasting. I love the challenge of it. I love the challenge of combining meteorology with whatever you want to call it, the social science of trying to communicate to people. You want to get it right, but I've been in many situations, especially when I was younger, where in my head I got the forecast right, but I could tell by the way a viewer was responding, which maybe just have been a neighbor also, that I didn't communicate that to them. So it's a constant learning process. So that part is fantastic. It's just I'm ready to not have a schedule, and this is going to sound really egotistical. I'm ready to not worry about is my suit right? Am I saying the promotion the right way?
Hair length?
Is my hair okay? I'm ready to be the behind the scenes guy, if that makes any sense at all. I'll put it one other way. Somebody asked me this, not the exact same question, but somebody asked me a few months ago, how many shows have you done? And I said, well, what do you mean by a show? And they said, well, let's just say like a 30-minute segment. And I'm even thinking here, with you, Ann, the red light comes on, and it doesn't matter what's going on with your life, doesn't matter what's happening with your kids or your spouse or anything else. The red light comes on, you got to do it, right? Of course, the whole red light go is another crazy part of it. But anyhow, I did some real quick math. Conservatively, I've done 40,000 shows.
Sheesh!
Wow.
And how George did it till his 80s, I have no idea. Now, without taking anything away from George, when I first started, and that wasn't until the early 80s, we basically just had a 30-minute noon show. A 30-minute morning show. Lou, how long is the morning show now?
2.5 hours now.
Yes.
Yep.
And
an hour at noon. Yeah.
And an hour at noon.
And the noon show was 30 minutes. And then the 6 and 11, that was it. So taking nothing away from George, but there was a period of time where, especially if you were the guy like George was, you did the 6 and you did 11. I think he did the noon too. Nowadays, or at least for 20, 25 years, I was doing the 5, the 5:30, the 6, the 7, and the 11. And don't get me wrong, I loved it. But 40,000 shows, it kind of
it's a good amount on the baseball
it adds
card.
up.
It kind of adds up. And so I'm ready to pull back, and if that makes any sense.
I want to take a call from Carol on the South Side. Good morning, Carol. Go ahead.
Hi, I've been in Jacksonville for almost 30 years, and during that time, we've never had a direct hit from a hurricane. So I'm just wondering if we are lucky or if there is some meteorological reason for that.
Thanks, Carol. There's always been the geographical question too. Is there something about the coastline shape that has spared us? And then, we have to
So do
knock
we have
on
an
wood.
hour? And then I'll throw it over to Lou. I'm going to be real quick, and then I'm
Please.
sure Lou wants to throw in an angle as well. Carol, first of all, great question. But I'm glad you're asking it as in it's never going to happen. Some people do get that, and please don't feel that. So if we're going to count Dora as our last true direct hit, Matthew was terrible, Irma was terrible, but they weren't direct landfalling hits. And I'll go to like 4th and 5th grade geography, and I was told this by some anthropologists, so hopefully it's relatively close. See if this somehow makes sense. If you look around the world at where civilizations first began, first of all, it tended to be in the northern hemisphere where there's more land, but at about 30 degrees north. All kind of reasons for that. But what I've been told by anthropologists is that that's where the hunter-gatherers were able to stay in one particular place because the weather was somewhat predictable. If you think about it without getting into too much stuff, at 30 degrees north, yeah, you're going to get fronts, but the really rough polar air and jet stream stuff stays north of you. At 30 degrees north, yeah, there's going to be hurricanes and tropical stuff, but you're not quite in the trade winds. You're a little farther to the south. And you can go all the way around the earth, and that's kind of how it is, generally speaking. And that's where some of your first civilizations developed. So therefore, it doesn't mean you're not going to be hit, but that means at 30 degrees north, which for those who don't know, that's about where we are. Second part of that.
This is latitude, folks, if you're listening.
I'm sorry, latitude.
Yep.
Thank you, Ann. Second part of that. But how do we face? We face east. Because people might be thinking, well, what about Houston? What about New Orleans? And if you're saying really 30 to 35 degrees, what about Savannah? What about Charleston? What about all those places? What about the Florida Panhandle? What about all those places at 30 degrees that do get hit? But where do their coasts face? South. So in other words, there's a billion things a hurricane can do, but generally speaking, in the trade winds, it's going to move east to west. But occasionally, because there'll be a break in the high pressure system, they're pulled north. And so they head north. If you talk to any engineer, any meteorologist, any climatologist, the direct hit is perpendicular. So in Jacksonville, that has to be coming from the east. But at 30 degrees north, if a hurricane's made the turn, it's going south to north, right? So then you start looking, we'll look at the places where the coast face south. Houston, Beaumont, New Orleans, Pensacola, Savannah, Charleston. So I could have just said in 5 seconds, yes, Ann, you're correct. It's geography. It helps us.
Yeah, and there's a little earth, physics to this. If the Coriolis force, if you think about something that's long tracking off the coast of Africa, eventually things get pulled to the right a little bit. What I would say, if you're thinking about direct hits to Jacksonville, and I go back to 2012 with Beryl, which was a tropical storm, but it was one that formed close to Florida. It was one that formed closer to shore. So anything that I think you have a greater potential for a more direct hit into the Jacksonville area or Southeast Georgia. Certainly exceptions will happen because of the high pressure block that could set up. But generally, if you get one of these quicker forming systems just off the coast, and these can happen, little clippers that will ultimately become tropical, that would give a greater threat, I think, for more direct landfalling because there's less time for Earth to play a part and for those pulling forces to play a part. And then you might be thinking, well, since it's close enough to shore, well, it won't be as strong. But you with the warmer sea surface temperatures, that's not the case anymore. I mean, you look at something. I mean, look at Dorian, for instance. Came at buzzsaw real quick. I mean, just last year we had a Beryl that formed and became a Category 5 essentially, or a major hurricane essentially overnight.
Michael,
right.
A great example of that. So the proximity to land and thinking, well, it's so close it can't strengthen and therefore won't be as big of a deal. That's really not accurate. So I'd be thinking about those ones that form close into the East Coast.
Right on it. And I've had one more thing, because some people say, well, what about Dora? Because Dora did it. So if you're kind of your own personal forecaster, what Dora did was making the classic curve, and then, as Lew mentioned, a stronger blocking high developed north of Bermuda. So it can happen. But if you want to sort of be your own forecaster at home, you're more worried in the summers in which you see these blocking highs develop north of Bermuda toward like New York City, which is why if you're making this long-term look, you don't want to hear that maybe New England's going to have a hotter and drier summer than normal, because that would imply a blocking high, and then you're worried about a Dora type scenario.
I've got a couple calls I want to get to, but I would be remiss if I didn't make you talk a little bit about what's happening in a couple of days, the start of the season, the forecast that NOAA has offered in terms of the intensity of the storm season. Can you give us a sense as to what you're watching for, what those forecasts mean, what people in this area should be predicting?
So, you get your NOAA forecast, you get your forecast from a place like Colorado State, and I mean, just year after year after year, it's always above average, or very above high, and that's been consistent. And I just a little behind the scenes sort of communication that Tim always has anytime the weather team has been like the last couple of weeks putting out, well, it's going to be an above average hurricane season. Tim will say, well, but let me just add,
what's average?
What is average relative to when Tim started in 1982?
Thank you, Lou.
I remember
Lou.
And I had put that in my back pocket.
Right.
It's one of those things.
Because average
about
has
14.
changed.
So I mean, average would be 14 named systems with 7 hurricanes, 3 major would be your average, as opposed to in the early 80s.
It was about 11. It was 5.5 and maybe 1. Intense.
Wow.
Now,
that's a big difference.
So we are looking at this above average. You're talking sea surface temperatures, of course, which we allude to all the time. You get above 80 degrees, and then you're prime. But we are a tick or two above average with sea surface temperatures, and then big global scale weather systems like a La Nina or a neutral phase, El Nino transitioning to La Nina. That has impacts. But you think about all this, and I want to temper anxiety a little bit, Tim. We talk about above average, talk about big storms, we talk about all the change, but the technology behind the forecasting has gotten so much better. I mean, just the accuracy in the last year from the Hurricane Center's forecast cone. We see that cone of uncertainty, cone of concern, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's tightening each year to where even this year, 3 to 5% more accurate and less error than in the previous year.
It's a great point. In other words, so in case people aren't hearing what I'm hearing Lou say is, we live in a good geographical area, but doesn't mean we can't be hit. But if it looks like we're going to be hit, we know so much farther in advance. So let me take you back. In 1982, there wasn't anything. We didn't even say what was our 5-day average error. There was not the attempt. It was only 3 days. And the 3-day average error back then was 400 miles in either direction. Think about that. The average 24-hour, which at the very least, that's where you're evacuating, the average 24-hour error back then in either direction was about 150 miles. Fast forward to now, your 3-day forecast average is about now what the 1 day used to be.
Wow.
It's down to about 100 miles. The 7-day is much better than the 3-day used to be. In fact, if people remember, there was originally a 3-day cone, then a 5-day cone, then a 7-day cone. The only reason, or the major scientific reason they decided to go farther out is not because they wanted to add risk. They wanted to give people more time to prepare. And really, once they did that, it was, why are we going to go to 5-day? Because the 5-day is now as good as the 3-day used to be. Why are we going to go to a 7-day cone? Because the 7-day is now as good as the 3-day used to be. So, yeah, great
What
point.
concerns do you have about, the NOAA cutbacks? I mean, we know that that's going to impact their ability to release these weather balloons as frequently, perhaps, as they have done. Are you concerned about this storm season being impacted by some of those DOGE cuts?
Maybe I can be looser with vocabulary than Lou, since I won't be.
Please.
Okay.
I want to hear you.
All right. So, certainly personnel, right? Yes, we have our own personnel here, but it's always helpful to hear what local meteorologists from the National Weather Service are looking at. It's my opinion that from 2000, because you get to be pretty good friends with some of these people, it's my opinion that from 2000 up until recently, they've been on a super tight, undermanned position as it was.
Right.
So now that there's even less people there, that's a big concern. But let me go quickly to the weather balloon. For people out there that maybe don't even watch Lou and I, maybe they don't take the National Weather Service forecast. Maybe they've decided that there's a model that they swear by, and Lou and I know that there are some people that are like that. They'll tell us what their model is saying and take it to the bank. Maybe they're totally fine with what Siri says or the newest AI. All of that, I don't care how great the computer model, to this day, if I think it's 90%, maybe I should say just 80%. 80% of the data that goes into any model you're using comes from the weather balloons. It comes from the weather balloons. Number one, the National Weather Service is doing it. So if they're not going to do it, who's going to do it? But to your point, and it's now been tracked by the relatively conservative Wall Street Journal, that since April, the amount of weather balloon soundings in the United States, which has always had the tightest grid, the more information. Well, living in Florida, it could be sunny at the bank and pouring here at WJCT or vice versa, right? So weather balloons can miss a whole lot, and yet we have the tightest grid. And if we're not sending up as many, what did we hear when we were all first learning about computers? Garbage in, garbage out. If we don't have that data, I don't care how great your weather model is. I don't care who you watch or listen to, even if it's not the National Weather Service. It's going to be detrimental.
And they've found since April that there's been a measurable disparity?
Well, I'll leave disparity out for now, but all they did was they counted.
Okay.
They got some double verification. At the very least, and this is just the United States, there's been a 15% decrease in soundings. I mean, you talk about, at the very least, if something's out there, we have more time to prepare for it. I don't see how that's not going to hurt the long-term models.
I do want to double
Yeah,
down. And so those guys, the Weather Service office in Jacksonville, they work so hard. And I will say, cuts or not, and they won't, friends, not friends, whoever over there, you try to, you ask them a question, and just for the safety of their own careers, they won't tell you anything, and that's for the best, right? What's going on in any weather service office, whether they've lost people or not here locally. But what I do know is these people are so heart-driven for the weather and for the safety of communities, just like we are, any local meteorologist would be and should be, that what they're doing now is just working more. So they're having to work more because they're still getting 2 soundings up a day. I still see, we're getting our weather balloons up every single day, at least in Jacksonville. It is a nested grid. It's a gridded thing. So what happens in Amarillo matters what happens in Jacksonville. But they are working so hard and making sure that no gaps are left. But ultimately, you realize that takes a toll on a human being.
Yep.
Message from Lisa on Facebook. She says, Tim is an icon and a great guy. Change is inevitable. Lewis will be terrific.
Oh.
And this feels so significant. I'll be 65 this summer, native of St. Augustine, have relied on Tim for my weather and to track hurricanes for a long time. Enjoy retirement, Tim. We'll miss you.
Amen.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and it is true. Tim, you've done yeoman's work at First Coast News, 42 years. You're going to be missed at the station.
If we're going to be accurate, 43.
43 now.
43,
right.
Yeah. Here's I've heard a lot of people say 42, and probably to younger people, whether it's 42 or 43.
Well, you beat Canamaro at 43.
Is
so
that right?
That matters. Yeah, because he was at 42.
Oh, well, no, it does. Next
That's
time
a
I
big
see
win.
him.
Bragging rights.
Yeah. We've had a promo running since last year where I think Paul, our promo guy, said, Tim, tell us.
Forecasting 42 years,
Yes.
and that's a year old.
And because people are hearing that, I
see.
think that's what's happening.
All right. Well, update it, Paul Bullock. Get on the stick,
Amen.
my friend.
Sheesh.
All right. Well, Lew Turner, you're going to do a fantastic job.
I
We're so
appreciate it.
lucky to have you at First Coast News.
I'm lucky to be there. I'm blessed. I've got like I said, great team, and having to getting to work with Tim. I haven't really truly given my well wishes to Tim yet either formally. And I love you, man. You are a top dog, and it has been wonderful to learn from you. And I know it's not over now. We've got till Friday.
Well, and you know where to find me afterwards, and I love you too. And without getting into a lot of stuff, Lew and I have been living life as husbands and dads as well, and during those hurricanes, especially, we can all get tired. But I think that's also, and you know this, during a heavy news situation, we all get tired. But I think also that sometimes is at the station when we bare our souls a little more, and then you go through that, and you know each other better. So yeah, Lou, love you too, and I got your back.
We text him frequently.
Yeah.
Tim Deegan, Lew Turner, thanks so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we'll have a safe storm season.
Amen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.